What's up, YouTube? So today I'm actually offline recording a video, and I decided to make a video about this topic of working offline. So one of the features of our modern world is that a lot of services are interconnected and online. You hear about remote work, all sorts of stuff that's going on that basically means people's day-to-day activities are decided by central servers, bureaucratic bodies. I don't know. It depends specifically for every sort of position of this nature. The point being, though, that there's some sort of central entity that's deciding how many of us spend many of our hours every day. So if it so happens that the internet does go down, like as happened to me last night and still going into this morning, what do you do? Do you not know what to do? Is your decision making totally scrambled? So I wrote this short little essay here discussing some of these things. So I'll read through this and elaborate on some points as necessary. Okay, so first I start with a question. How much work could you do offline? This is a question of to what extent you control the tools you own and the products, services that you offer. So I put quotes around own, because you could say you own like a Windows license or something to use your computer, for instance. Does that mean that you own Windows? Not really. Essentially, it means you're granted access rights to use some particular software. And we could see how with not just software, but stuff like, cars, tractors, airplanes, all sorts of stuff, too, they have similar mechanisms at work. Alright, continuing. Consider doing some kind of handicraft as the ultimate decentralized activity. If you manage to make some money doing some knitting, for instance, you can take this activity nearly anywhere and continue to do productive labor, even sheltering away in a bunker during a tornado. And then, as an example of like what I'm doing here, writing this, being able to do research with pen or paper or simple text editing tools like a word processor is another example of highly decentralized work. I'll just bring another example forward. A lot of people, when they're doing something like studying a foreign language, they might want to use some service like Duolingo or something. Now, I'm not saying that these tools aren't useful and that you shouldn't use them, but suppose you dropped your phone and it stopped working or something else happened, right? So that's where if you have good old-fashioned like phrase books or textbooks or something like that, then these things offer a more decentralized workflow for doing an activity like studying a language. And of course, the more people you know and the more different places you could go in order to support some activity that you do. Like let's say you play piano and you actually know 4 or 5 different pianos you could go to if the one that you normally use didn't work. Then you could continue to do your piano exploration activities in many different places. So decentralization here. Now, let's contrast that with something like all your workflow is centered around using Gmail. Well, Google has an outage. You can't access Gmail for, let's say, 2 hours. Does that totally rock your day and make you panic? Is everything dependent on that one service offered by one person, and there's no way to decentralize it or use other options? That, I think, is a situation that we wouldn't want to be in. So in some cases, when everything is working smoothly, it's going well, it could be really convenient to have a kind of centralized workflow in that way. But ultimately, you become very delicate. It's like you're a cyclist or some kind of athlete. You're really good at riding a bicycle fast, but if the road conditions are bad, or your bike breaks, or you trip and then you hurt your leg in a particular way, you're not a very robust individual, though you might be hyper efficient at doing certain things in one particular way. Okay, another example. On the other hand, you could find lots of self-deprecating humor from software devs or developers describing how they can't do anything without particular websites. The idea is that most of their daily tasks amount to looking things up in centralized systems, such as databases, and probably using Google as their search engine. So if you teach yourself any kind of programming or computer stuff, and you try to look at the so-called communities centered around a lot of these things, you're going to find tons of people just expressing their people saying to each other, basically, I don't know what's going on. Whenever I encounter a problem, I just look it up on Google. Because a lot of the nature of this work is looking at very complex, intricate systems, relatively new tools with lots of things to work out. These aren't time-tested tools in the same way like you aren't reading documentation on how to use a hammer and nails every day. You practice, you work with the hammer, somebody could show you how to use it more efficiently, and so on. But a lot of the development, the computer type tools, is like, oh yeah, we're using this exciting new technology, and then there's all these problems with it, and everybody is kind of running around with their hands up figuring out how to work on it together. So you'll have senior people that know a lot and take the time to answer a lot of the questions that people might have to offer, but you have a lot of people that are not really being trained or mentored, whatever you want to call it, as they come into this space. And I don't know, it seems like Twitter especially loves this, where you have a lot of people just talking or buzzing, making noise about like JavaScript or something. And people often express how they're reliant on centralized systems, such as a website called Stack Overflow is a common example. Okay, next paragraph. For building robust infrastructure to serve you and your communities, being overly dependent on central services like big tech is not a good idea. While we may make use of the services these entities offer, such as here, this video is going to go on YouTube, the essentials of one's work ideally are not heavily yoked to a particular entity, like a corporation and a service they offer, like Instagram or YouTube or something like that. This is because these entities themselves are not relatively stable, unchanging things that you can rely on. You do not want to position yourself such that one change of policy by some one party could make useless all the skills you acquired. So, yeah, just building off this, like one note might be, like a lot of people that really like music generally, they might be best at one instrument. They might have like one favorite thing they like, but like if you find a really good guitarist that also really likes music, chances are they would be excited and have fun messing around on like a bass guitar or a mandolin or even like a cello or something. They'll understand things about stringed instruments generally, and then they'll be able to do a whole lot because they have more general skills, a better, wider understanding. It's not just like they're a guitar-only expert, but the guitar is an instrument by which they could understand and explore music more broadly. Okay. Next section. So lessons from trading. One thing I do is I trade stocks and cryptocurrencies, stuff like that. So a couple notes. And I'll mention a lot of these ideas I first got reading this fellow, Nicholas Nassim Taleb, in a book called, he's wrote a number of books, but his most famous one is probably this book called Black Swan. So pretty famous recent book. You might want to check it out. Okay, so some lessons from trading. Suppose the price of Bitcoin goes down. Is that a bad thing? So for a person that styles themselves an investor, they may perceive themselves as losing money if the price of some asset they own drops. On the other hand, the mentality of a trader, so you're planning on making buying and selling. It's not like I'm just stacking up a pile of money. Rather, the trader knows they're going to be making buys and sells. So the mentality of a trader is to make profits, preserve capital, and so on in any number of market climates, including Bitcoin price going down. So instead of saying like, oh no, my money pile is smaller, then a trader mentality might be to see the price of Bitcoin going down, and then you might say, oh, this might be a good opportunity to buy, because if you expect the price of Bitcoin to go up eventually, and you buy while it's down, then like obviously that means you're gonna make a gain and make some profit there. So we could apply similar thinking in an event such as the internet service going down. So like what I'm experiencing now is the internet went down. So what could I do about that? Well, one thing to do is, well, now I know that I'm not going to be just clicking mindlessly on different videos or articles on the internet, because now that's actually impossible. I have to sit down and, write an essay, put together some coherent thoughts, and I could record a video. I could still do that even if I'm offline. So ask questions like, what opportunities present themselves now that normally I might be overlooking? How can I best capitalize on this situation? So you have a kind of indifference to, did a bad thing happen? Did a good thing happen? You don't have to say like, oh no, the internet's down, bad. Rather just say like, okay, well, the fact is that the internet's down. It's not my job to put it back up. So now I could take this opportunity. Maybe there's like a book that I had wanted to read. Maybe now I could not be a monkey brain and go and decide to read and look at that book that I've been putting off, now that my constant screen stimulus has been taken away from me. Okay, next subsection. Centralized information technology structure. So here I'm just describing briefly like one model of how a lot of stuff is getting centralized. So I started here talking about how like handicraft, knitting, maybe the ultimate decentralized type work you could do. What we see is that a lot of basically every aspect of life, there's companies and stuff actively working to yoke everything up to centralized systems. So we're seeing more and more things getting centralized. Particularly common is the spreading of subscription-based models, paying fees at some regular interval, like monthly, to unlock some service, such as like Spotify, listening to a music library. I hear like Photoshop, stuff like that, graphic software, they have also turned to a subscription model. And I've heard even stuff like unlocking your car. I've heard stories that auto manufacturers, as they add more and more electronics to their vehicles, they'll do it in the name of security, saying like, oh, you could lock out an attacker or whatever. But basically, it also means that they could make you pay for a kind of subscription service, even to access your car. So your car has turned into a subscription-based service type thing, even though you buy it to supposedly own it. So for people that control the stuff, the advantages of this approach are clear. You could consistently extract money from customers. So like I got 1 million customers and they all pay $5 a month. Then that's like, 5 million in revenue. And essentially you have a monopoly over the service you provide. So if a car manufacturer is the only party that could do service on their vehicles because of electronic this and that, so I hear Tesla, for example, does this, then you're not going to have small independent repair shops that could repair their cars and maybe offer a cheaper service or do some custom thing that the manufacturer doesn't want. This is an effort at big, major centralization and also standardization. So I name like cars, graphics, drawing, music, all sorts of places you could find this. Another place I've heard about this is the so-called struggle of right to repair, and I think like tractors, farm equipment. This was the context that people began really talking about that. I haven't looked into the specifics much, but same general idea here. Okay, so what's to be done about all this? First off, no doom and gloom. It doesn't help to say like, oh no, all this centralization's happening. This sucks. What's going to happen is going to happen. Take control of what you have the ability to take control of. So while the above approach, the subscription thing, has been successfully encroaching on many, many different parts of life, our God-given abilities are still with us. We can choose still to develop ourselves, our families, and our communities. However, it might take some pain or shock to realize what these areas are and what we could do. So, for example, a power outage could be an instructive event to help us realize in which way we are dependent on monolithic impersonal entities, including the power plant. So if the power goes out or something, do you think you could last 72 hours? How long do you think you could last if such a thing happens? And what sort of resources would you want to have available to you? And even beyond yourself, for example, I've had power outages where I am, and it was like, oh, actually, this is pretty chill. In fact, I got some candles. I could just sit here and I'll actually enjoy the time. Now, that's like level 1. You take care of yourself in a way. But what would be even better is if you could also help those people around you. So if, for example, you know how to prepare for like a power outage, and then you don't just have like some candles for yourself, but you actually keep on stock like a big box in order to hand them out and give them to your neighbors. Like I'm in an apartment complex. If somebody asked me for something, would I be able to help them out and give it to them? Then I think generally that would be a good thing to be able to do. So we could understand the mechanics, the science, understand the cause and effect relationships of how stuff like subscription models spread. How does the establishment grow? And then we could set up ourselves to benefit from the giant clunking machine, such as me uploading this video to YouTube. So while all this stuff is there, while it's working, while billions and billions of dollars are being put in to make these things, I think there's nothing wrong with making the best use of them that you can, making them useful to you. But then the trick, or the thing that takes a little bit more careful navigating, is while simultaneously making the best use of the things that are available to you, you don't want to become overly dependent on such things, such as YouTube makes a policy change, like removing the dislike button or changing their algorithm somehow. If these things make you like lose sleep and bother you, then that's like a victory of the world over you. So that concludes my short presentation here of working online. I've been enjoying this short internet outage, and I hope whatever inconveniences or difficulties you might encounter, focus like what could I learn from this, and also how could I use this opportunity that I have of sort of routine being shaken up in order to learn to do better. So thank you all for joining. Like, subscribe, smash the notification bell, do all that YouTube stuff, and until next time.